My brother harassed my wife at Christmas. My parents kicked me out and called him the best son. But when Tyler stole $50,000 from them and blackmailed them, they begged for my forgiveness and never expected life would make them pay so dearly. I'm 30 years old. I work in cybersecurity. Basically, I'm an ethical hacker, meaning I get paid to find vulnerabilities in company systems before the bad guys find them. I'm married to Emma, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened with my family over the last 3 years literally changed my life, and I don't know. Maybe telling it will help me process all of this now that things are, let's say, complicated again. The thing is that my younger brother Tyler, who's 26 now, basically destroyed our family by being an asshole. My parents chose the wrong side, and then everything exploded in a way that nobody saw coming. I guess I should start at the beginning, when everything was normal and I thought we had a decent family. I grew up in a pretty traditional family, you know. Mom and Dad celebrated their 35th anniversary like a year ago. Well, they tried to celebrate it, but I'll get to that. My father has a moderately successful business, nothing fancy, but he does well, and we were always close, or so I thought. Tyler is 4 years younger than me, and for a long time we were tight. Like we did things together, played video games, he'd ask me for advice about girls when he was in college, that kind of normal brother relationship. But, looking back, I think there was always something off about him, like he was too competitive with me, and not in a healthy way. You know what I mean? If I achieved something, he had to achieve something better. If I dated someone, he'd make weird comments, that kind of thing that in the moment doesn't seem like a big deal, but later you understand they were red flags. I met Emma about 5 years ago. She worked in marketing at a tech company, and we met at a cybersecurity conference. Yeah, I'm that kind of nerd who goes to conferences. And it was love at first sight. Seriously, sounds cheesy, but it's true. We started dating. Things were incredible from the beginning. And after about a year, I formally introduced her to my family. My parents loved her immediately. My mother said Emma was perfect for me, that she'd never seen me so happy, and I thought, great. My family adores my girlfriend. Everything is perfect. Tyler also seemed to get along with her at first. Like he was friendly. They'd chat at family dinners, nothing out of the ordinary. But around 2 years into my relationship with Emma, I started noticing that Tyler acted weird when she was around, like he'd stare at her too much, or try to sit next to her at family gatherings, or give her too many compliments about her clothes or her hair. Emma mentioned it to me a couple of times, like, "Your brother is kind of intense, isn't he?" But I downplayed it because, honestly, I didn't want to believe my brother could be such an idiot. Everything exploded 3 years ago at the Christmas party at my parents' house. It was December, I think like the 22nd or 23rd, and the whole family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, the whole package. You know how those Christmas gatherings are where there's too many people and too much alcohol. Emma and I arrived around 7 at night. She looked beautiful in a red dress, random detail, but I remember it perfectly because it's the last time we went to a family party together while being happy. And everything was going well at first. We ate, chatted, toasted, the usual. But around 10 at night, Emma went to the kitchen to get more wine, and I was in the living room talking with my cousin about whatever. And suddenly I hear Emma's voice, like firm but clearly uncomfortable, saying, "Tyler, seriously, stop." I ran to the kitchen, and there was my brother, literally cornering Emma against the kitchen counter, with one hand on the wall next to her head, totally in her personal space, and her with her arms crossed, trying to maintain distance. I asked what was going on, and Emma told me that Tyler had been saying inappropriate things to her, like that I didn't deserve her, that she should be with someone younger and more fun, meaning him, obviously, and that if she ever got tired of me, he'd be there waiting for her. And the worst part is that when I confronted him, Tyler didn't deny it, like he laughed and said something like, "I was just being honest. She's beautiful, and you're boring. Someone had to tell her." I don't know what happened to me in that moment. I literally saw red. And before I could process it, I already had him by the shirt collar yelling at him to apologize to Emma immediately. He pushed me. I pushed him back. And we ended up on the kitchen floor throwing punches while my father and 2 uncles separated us. It was a total disaster. Emma was crying. My mother was screaming. Half the room had run over to see what was happening, and the party basically ended right there. That night, after we left, well, we were kicked out, technically, Emma told me everything. Apparently, Tyler had been sending her text messages for months. Nothing too explicit at first. Like, "Hi, how are you? Just wanted to check on you." That kind of thing that seems harmless, but was clearly inappropriate coming from your boyfriend's brother. She had ignored them because she didn't want to cause family drama. But that night he had escalated things. First in the living room, he'd whispered to her that she looked sexy. Then he followed her to the kitchen, and that's when what I saw happened. I felt like the worst piece of trash in the world for not believing her earlier when she told me Tyler was weird, and I promised her she'd never have to be around him again. The next day I called my parents and explained everything. Showed them the messages Emma had been receiving, told them exactly what Tyler had said to her in the kitchen, and I expected, I don't know, for them to support me unconditionally, you know? At first it seemed like they would. My mother was horrified. My father was furious with Tyler. They told me they'd talk to him and that it was unacceptable. Turns out, they told him to apologize to me and Emma, but Tyler refused. Like he said I had overreacted, and that Emma probably misinterpreted his friendly intentions, as if cornering someone against a counter and telling them to get tired of their boyfriend was friendly. I cut off contact with Tyler immediately, blocked him from everything, told my parents I wouldn't go to any family event if he was there, and Emma obviously didn't want to see him ever again either. For about 6 months, my parents respected that. They'd have separate dinners, celebrate birthdays on different days so we could see each of them without crossing paths, and I thought, well, this is the best we can do given the situation. It's not ideal, but it works. But after those 6 months, Tyler apparently apologized to my parents. Not to me, not to Emma, just to them. Told them he was sorry, that he'd been going through a rough time, that he'd had too much to drink that night, blah blah blah. All the typical excuses people give when they do something horrible. And my parents, God. My parents believed him completely, like they forgave him without even asking me how I felt about it. Things got really bad about 9 months after the original incident, when my parents were planning their 35th anniversary party. It's a big number, you know, so they wanted to do something special. A party at their house with the whole family, music, expensive food, the whole package. They called me like 2 months before the event to tell me about the plans, and everything sounded good until casually, at the end of the conversation, my mother mentioned that Tyler was also going to be there. I froze like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Well, it's our anniversary. We want both our sons there. Enough time has passed. It's time for you to get over this. Get over this." As if Tyler hitting on my girlfriend and then refusing to apologize was something that just happened, and that's it. Like a minor misunderstanding that needs to be forgotten. I told my mother very clearly that if Tyler was going to be at that party, Emma and I weren't going. Period. It wasn't negotiable. She started with the drama, like, "You can't do this to us on our special day. We're your parents. Tyler is your brother. Family is the most important thing." All that classic emotional manipulation. I explained to her for the umpteenth time what Tyler had done. Reminded her that he never apologized to us. Told her that Emma shouldn't have to be in the same room with someone who harassed her. And my mother basically responded that Emma was probably exaggerating, and that I was being very dramatic. That hurt more than I can explain. Like, my own mother invalidating what happened to Emma just to avoid dealing with the discomfort of the situation. I talked to my father afterwards, thinking maybe he'd be more reasonable, and at first he seemed to understand me. But in the end, he told me the same thing, that it was their anniversary, that they wanted both their sons there, and that if I couldn't put my differences with Tyler aside for one night, then maybe I was the one with the problem, not Tyler. That destroyed me, seriously. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I gave them a very simple ultimatum. Him or me. If Tyler was going to be at that party, we weren't going, and if they wanted us to be there, then Tyler couldn't be. I gave them like a month to decide, thinking they'd surely choose the son who hadn't done anything wrong over the son who had harassed their daughter-in-law, but I was completely wrong. My father called me 2 weeks later and told me, literally, that they had decided Tyler was going to go to the party because he had shown remorse and was trying to improve, and that I was being the difficult one by not wanting to forgive. And then, and this still hurts to think about, he told me. I think Tyler is the better son right now. He's at least trying to fix things while you just set conditions and make threats. The better son. He told me that my brother, the same one who harassed my then girlfriend, now wife, was a better son than me, because I had boundaries and wasn't going to tolerate that shit. I hung up the phone and cried for the first time in years. I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a kid. Emma hugged me and told me she understood. If I wanted to go anyway, because they were my parents and it was their anniversary. But I told her no. That if my parents couldn't respect our boundaries and protect her from someone who had treated her that way, then they didn't deserve to have us in their lives. We didn't go to the party, obviously, and we spent that day doing things we liked. We went to a nice restaurant, watched movies, tried to make it a normal day, but I couldn't stop thinking about my parents celebrating with Tyler, probably telling everyone I was the problem. This is where the story gets really crazy, because the party was on a Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon I get a frantic call from my mother. She's crying, like hysterical, can barely speak, and when she finally manages to calm down, she tells me that Tyler stole important documents from my father's office. Apparently, during the party, Tyler went to my father's office, which is in the house, like a study on the second floor, and stole files about client contracts, financial information about the company, business strategies, basically everything someone would need to screw up my father's business or sell it to the competition. My father discovered it Sunday morning when he went to work on something and noticed documents were missing and his computer had been tampered with. My mother was begging me to help, like, you work with computers, you can track him, you can find the documents, you can do something, please help us. And here comes the part where I probably seem like a son of a bitch, but I told her no. I told her very clearly that they had chosen Tyler over me, that they had ignored all my warnings about his behavior, that they had invalidated what he did to Emma, and that now they were living with the consequences of those decisions. My mother started yelling about how I could be so cruel, that it was my family, that my father could lose his business, and I told her, you should have thought about that before calling me a bad son for having boundaries. I hung up and blocked their numbers because I knew they were going to keep calling. Emma asked me if I felt bad, and I honestly told her no, that I felt a kind of sick vindication, like, see? This is what happens when you enable toxic behavior. Tyler didn't change, he just found a new way to screw people over. But there was also a part of me that felt horrible because, honestly, my father hadn't done anything directly that terrible to me. Like, his crime was choosing the wrong son and saying hurtful things to me. But he didn't deserve to be robbed, you know? It was a very confusing mix of emotions. About 3 days later, I received an email from my father. He hadn't blocked him on email, my mistake. The email basically explained that Tyler had contacted them and confessed that he had the documents, but that he wasn't going to return them unless they paid him. Extortion. Literal extortion of our own parents. Tyler was asking for like $50,000, a ridiculous amount but specific enough that he knew exactly how much those documents were worth on the market. And if they didn't pay him within 2 weeks, he was going to sell the documents to my father's competitors. My father's email was different in tone from my mother's. Like, he wasn't asking me to hack anything, he was just telling me what was happening. I think because part of him knew I was right all along about Tyler. What my parents were originally asking me to do, by the way, was technically illegal. They were asking me to hack Tyler's accounts, to find where he had stored the files, to basically use my professional skills in an unethical and illegal way to solve their problem. And I couldn't do that. Not just because of the legal aspect, he could lose my job, my license, potentially go to prison, but because it would validate all their previous behavior. It would be telling them it was okay that they treated me like shit, because in the end, I would always be there to rescue them. I replied to my father's email with something very short. Basically, I'm sorry you're going through this, but you chose to have Tyler in your lives knowing what he was capable of. The consequences of that decision are not my responsibility. Hire a lawyer and handle this legally. Good luck. And then I also blocked his email, because I didn't want to keep receiving messages about it. About 2 weeks passed without knowing anything, and honestly, Emma and I were living in peace for the first time in months. Not having to deal with family drama was liberating. Like, we could focus on our marriage we had gotten married about 6 months before all this. I forgot to mention that. On our jobs, on our friends, on our life. Emma would ask me from time to time if I felt guilty, and I'd tell her the truth. That sometimes I did, especially thinking about my father, but that I knew I had done the right thing by maintaining my boundaries. Then, about 3 weeks after the theft, I get another email from my father. He saw it before blocking it because it went to my spam folder, and I check that folder regularly for work. This email was a complete apology. My father wrote that he and my mother had been talking a lot, that they realized they had made a terrible mistake by choosing Tyler over me, that they should have respected my boundaries from the beginning, that Emma should never have had to go through what she went through, and that they deeply regretted calling me a bad son. He said he understood if I never forgave them, but that he wanted me to know they finally saw Tyler for what he really was, an unscrupulous manipulator. My mother sent a similar email, like more emotional and with more details about how guilty she felt. Turns out they paid Tyler's ransom because they had no other choice. My father couldn't risk those documents reaching his competitors because it would have been the end of his business. They hired a lawyer who helped document everything legally and put in safeguards so Tyler couldn't do something like that again. Password changes, security systems, all that stuff my father honestly should have had from the beginning. Tyler took the money and disappeared. My parents haven't heard from him since. I think he moved to another state. I'm not sure, and honestly, I don't care. I didn't reply to those emails immediately because I needed time to process. Emma and I talked a lot about whether we wanted to let my parents back into our lives. We had been fine without them. Why risk more drama? But also, honestly, I missed them. I missed my mother. I missed talking to a father about random things. I missed having a family, you know what I mean? But I wasn't ready to forgive them yet, or at least not right away. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. Emma and I had been trying to get pregnant for a while, and it finally worked. She took the test, and it came out positive, and it was literally the happiest day of my life. We decided to wait a bit before telling people, to make sure everything was okay. But after the first trimester, we announced it on our social media with a cute picture of baby shoes and all that cheesy stuff people do. And 2 hours after posting it, I get a message from my mother on Instagram, because I didn't have her blocked there, another mistake. The message said something like, "Congratulations to both of you. We're so happy for you, and I know we have no right to ask you for anything, but we'd love to be part of our grandchild's life if you'll allow us." That broke my heart a little. I'm not going to lie. The idea of my child growing up without knowing their grandparents made me sad, but I also knew I couldn't just forgive and forget like nothing had happened. I talked to Emma, and she, being the incredible person she is, told me the decision was mine, that she'd support me in whatever I decided, but that if I felt my parents had really changed and learned from their mistakes, maybe it was worth giving them a chance, especially for our baby. I responded to my mother's message about a week later and told her that Emma and I were willing to talk, but that we had conditions. First, never, under any circumstances, did we want Tyler to know about the baby or have access to any information about our family. Second, we needed them to specifically acknowledge how they had hurt us and apologize directly to Emma, not just to me. Third, this was their only chance. If they chose wrong again or minimized our boundaries, it was over forever. My parents accepted everything immediately. We had a video call. About 2 weeks later, where they apologized to Emma directly, she cried. My mother cried. It was very emotional and honest, and it felt good. It felt like maybe they had really learned something. We've had a couple of dinners since then, like small and controlled meetings, and so far everything has been going well. They're not trying to pressure us or act like nothing happened. They're really making an effort to rebuild trust, and that means a lot. Last week, we went baby shopping with my mother, and it was weird but nice. Seeing my mom excited, choosing little clothes made me feel things I hadn't felt in a long time. My father called me a few days ago just to ask how Emma was doing and how the pregnancy was going, and we chatted for half an hour about normal things, work, the weather, plans for the baby, and it was the first normal conversation we've had in literally 3 years. I don't know what's going to happen long term, honestly. Part of me is still angry with them, for everything that happened, for making me choose between them and my wife, for calling Tyler the better son, but another part of me is relieved to have them back in my life, that my child is going to know their grandparents, that maybe, just maybe, we can have something resembling a functional family again. Emma is being incredibly patient with this whole process. She always asks me how I feel after each interaction with my parents, and reminds me that it's okay if I need more time, or if I decide I can't continue with this. As for Tyler, I don't know anything about him, and honestly, I hope I never do again. My parents say they haven't had contact with him since the theft. I think they finally cut all ties after the extortion. Although part of me wonders if they're being completely honest about that, or if someday Tyler is going to show up again causing more drama. But for now, I prefer not to think about that and focus on the good things. My incredible wife who stood by me through this whole mess, the baby on the way, and the possibility of a renewed relationship with my parents who truly value and respect our family. I guess the moral of all this, if there is one, is that it's okay to have boundaries, even with your family, especially with your family, and that sometimes people need to suffer real consequences to understand the damage they caused. I don't know if I did everything right. I still wonder sometimes if I should have helped my parents when Tyler robbed them, but I think if I had, they never would have really learned the lesson. They never would have seen Tyler for what he was. It was painful. It was horrible. But in the end, maybe it was necessary.